Good evening. With this punctibyte, we head into the week of the 25th of February, and what I would say might be the busiest time of the whole semester. So I'm actually going to spend a lot of time talking about scheduling tonight, and I'm going to ask for your help as we head into a time that's going to be a little bit rough for me, as we'll be heading off to nationals, obviously not this weekend, but next weekend. So it's a very short amount of time before I'll be headed out of town. And so there's just a lot of logistics and a lot of things to get taken care of and to get done. Let's begin with just a little bit on this week and what will be happening throughout the week this week, and then what we need to look forward to. So to begin with, we'll be doing the very action-packed labs 10 and 11. And the hard thing is that this will hit on the same day as the lecture exam. That's a hard way to schedule things, and so I will need a little bit of extra help with getting the exams passed out, particularly if I am giving those lectures. That, if you guys can help, and you're always so incredibly wonderful with that, getting the exams to the students and getting them started. We have a little bit of room scheduling logistics, and I'll explain that to different people as their time frame comes up, but we might be having people take an exam during some of the time frames down the hall. So I'll explain that as it does happen and does pertain. We'll be doing Lab 12 on Thursday and Friday for most of you, though T and Elia will do that one on the 25th or on the 26th, but then you'll be doing the fungus among us on the 28th. So we'll go on and talk a little bit about that one as well. Bo and Jesse, you're going to be up for open labs, so I'm going to look forward to having you there to help for the open lab, but also I'm going to go ahead and request that at least T and Elia try to be there if you can for open lab, because we actually need to set your practical exam up on that day. So what that means is that for everyone, I need to know your practical exam questions by Friday. You will find those questions on your TA jump drive that you downloaded. So you'll want to look through those, and as a group, that is, if you TA in the mornings on Tuesday and Thursday, that is either the 8 to 10 or the 10 to 12 sections, you'll choose a version together. So that means that Amy and Mara and Callie, Carl, and Anna, you guys will have one version. And then the afternoon groups will have another version. So Kyle and Bo and Jesse and Aaron, you guys are all going to have a version in Terra that will be your afternoon Tuesday, Thursday version. So that's how that's going to work, and so I'll look forward to getting those questions from you by Friday. So we'll have to set up the version for Elia's lab on Friday. And then you'll notice that going into the week of the 4th through the 8th, this is where things get logistically difficult, because I will be gone. So this is a little bit hard, and what I may end up doing is I will have somebody taking over for me when I'm gone on the 5th. Chelsea will be there again on the 5th, so I know everybody looks forward to seeing her. And she is more than willing to give some of the Fungus Among Us lectures, but again, we don't want to saddle her with all of them. So I want some of you to get stoked about giving the Fungus Among Us lectures and really do a bang-up job of delivering these lectures. There's really important content in these lectures, and it's a content-heavy day in the lab, just because we don't want to saddle them with a bunch of new lab concepts on the day before the practical. So try to be ready for that day. And then, of course, when T and Elia have their lab practical on Tuesday, we're going to want to do that turnover on the night of the 5th to have the lab practical ready to go on that next day. So it's really important that we schedule how we're going to take care of that. So what we'll want to do is to have Richard and Jacob coordinate with your groups as to when you want to set up the practical and turn around from the version that T and Elia had to the version that we will have for David and James and your lab section. So we want to be sure that everything is all turned around and that things are ready to go with that. And sorry, Shanker, as well. So that's going to be a little bit of a tough turnaround, and I want to make sure that before I even leave that all of this is scheduled and ready to go. I'm then going to go ahead and suggest that that the morning Tuesday, Thursday labs that happen on the 7th will plan to have a time that they will schedule to get together on the night of the 6th to turn that version around. So Amy and Mara, you guys can decide on how you want to do that, but once again, unlike normal, I won't be there to turn it around for you, so we need to make sure that those versions do get changed out. The other thing that I should mention is that we need to make sure that we have all the media, and I've been trying to set those aside, but there are some that we need to inoculate, and so that will also need to get done on this Friday. So we can also set certain of the things up on that day, but if you know that your lab practical is going to need extra media inoculated, we should go through and make sure that all of that is taken care of on Friday. So we have just a lot coming up, a lot going on. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about labs 10 and 11 TA guidelines. That's a rehash on those. And then for lab 12, I want to talk about that too, but I'll make a few notes on lab 13 as well. So beginning with labs 10 and 11, there's a lot of logistics that go down on this day. When the students walk in the door, they need to immediately set up their transformation experiment. That is, they'll be working through the first steps, and I've actually pulled up lab 10 here so we can talk about this directly. So essentially, they're going to work through step 1 where they label their plates, they label their tubes. They're also going to pipette in their P-glow plasmid as well as the E. coli cells, and so this is working through step 6. Step 6 is where they're going to pause, and it's really important that in that pause, we get the lecture going. So we'll start the lecture, spend about 20 minutes on the lecture, and have the last group of students that get their tubes on ice let us know when that has happened, and we'll go to the heat shock, the 30-second heat shock. Then once we get things back into the incubator at 37 degrees for 30 minutes, that's when we can finish the lecture. It's also when we'll have them work through lab 11, and it's also the time that we're going to try to facilitate discussion with them regarding the hand washing experiment. And remember how we talked about how important it is to really talk about that hand washing experiment and to help them facilitate their understanding of, again, the idea that yes, we do want to wash our hands even if we see, excess bacteria on the treated side, and what might have caused that, and what we're looking for defining improvement, whether or not there are things that are non-normal flora on the untreated side versus the treated side. So those are all really important concepts that we want to be sure that we do cover. So that'll be during that second 30-minute incubation, and then once they get plated, really everything should summarize very nicely and things should be ready to go. That is it for labs 10 and 11. We'll go on and talk a little bit about lab 12, and in lab 12, there's a titration of the bacteriophage suspension. We'll have them take agar plugs, which now is a technique that they know, from their plaques, and they'll dilute those and plate those in an overlay technique. So the hard thing about this technique is that the LB top agar that they're using is very small volume. It's like 3 milliliters. So it does solidify rather rapidly. So make sure that they don't hold on to that for a long period of time before they try to pour it on the top of their overlay, or they definitely will get solidification. The other thing is during this lab, we need to go through the transformation results. So it's during this time that I usually have really nice individual discussion with the students about their results. So if you end up being a person that takes them back to talk about their results and to view them under the UV light, make sure you do discuss with them the results that they're seeing and why they're seeing what they are, and make sure they understand gene induction. This is a conversation we can have before they go back to look at the transformant plates as well, so we'll just we will take that as it comes and go with the flow to a certain extent on that day. If you're giving the bacteriophages lecture, the good thing to know about that lecture is that it is rather straightforward in that most of what you need to talk about is in the lecture itself. But I do give just a little bit of extra information on the TA guidelines, particularly with regards to the genome of the T-even phages of E. coli. And I also give a little bit of extra information about animal viruses because often students' curiosity takes them in that direction. Okay, let's talk just briefly about Lab 13. The Fungus Among Us is one of my favorite lectures, and I'm a little bit sad that I'm not going to be there. But again, Chelsea is really jazzed to help with this. She's super excited to be there and really excited to take on a certain number of the lectures as well. So make sure you do touch bases with her if, again, you're planning not to do it, even though maybe you're signed up for it on the schedule. So let's talk just a little bit about what will go on during this lab. It's rather dead with regards to lab work, and I usually tell the students that I'm pretty chill about how they go about that lab work. They need to do a wet mount of yeast, they need to go back and observe the different kinds of molds, and they also need to cut a gill from a portobello mushroom and take a look at that. So there's not a ton of lab work, which means that it does free maybe one of the TAs to go ahead and work a little bit on practical preparation. So that might be a time when you can think about getting some of your practical exams set up and the questions may be held aside. But of course, remember, we have to do that version by version. So the people that have the practical first have to be able to lay their questions out first. Okay, so I think that gives us a sense of what's going on with regards to the upcoming schedule and the labs that are coming. I want to make just a couple of notes about other logistical things. First of all, I think I have now had the opportunity to watch everyone give a lecture or hear part of your lecture. I've been very impressed with a couple of things. Number one, I've been really impressed with the preparations that everyone has been doing. It really matters. I can absolutely tell when you have prepared for a lecture or when you haven't prepared, and the students can too. It really makes a difference to them. It's super easy to start to think to yourself, wow, you know, I've been studying bacteriophage for years. You know, if I can't give a bacteriophage lecture, there's something wrong with me. You know what? It has absolutely nothing to do with your knowledge about bacteriophage. It has everything to do with your delivery, your enthusiasm, your preparation, what you have done to think about how to teach this content, not your understanding of this content. So that's a really important thing to remember. So in almost every respect, I've been super impressed with your forethought in that area. As a group, we've been doing pretty well with going slowly enough, but I think that's one area we can improve on, making sure to really make eye contact with your audience to get a sense for whether they're done with writing with what they are needing to write down. And if they're not, that is when we have to make sure that we have something else to say in those spots. And that's where these TA guidelines come in, so that you do have enough to say in the time when they're writing. That's important because we want to give them the time to think and process this information. One of the biggest troubles you can get yourself into with giving a lecture is thinking that your audience already knows what you're saying, and that's not the case. There might be one anomaly out there that does know already, but that is not the person you're lecturing to. It's the people who haven't heard about this yet, and that's most everyone. So don't get yourself caught up in overthinking what your audience might know. Also, I wanted to mention that as a group, and maybe is maybe exactly what I want to mention. We need to work on auditory pauses. There's an okay time for a pause. It's actually all right to pause for a minute, and a silent pause is fine. But when we start to use excessive auditory pauses, it really does make your audience start to feel uncomfortable. So when the right or those sorts of things start to become excessive, one or two here or there is not going to bother anyone, but we want to try to think about how to take those down. So the best way I find for myself to do that is actually to just think about being silent. And that's something I'm working on being better at, not saying anything. But I think it's okay to pause and think for just a moment. No one will notice it. In fact, they're probably busy writing and they don't notice the silence at all, but they will notice the excessive auditory pauses. So I think breathing is another good way to think about that. You know, I'm going to pause and take a breath. In a regular lecture hall, I will take a drink of water. That's not possible in the lab, I know. But there are things that you can do with those pauses that would allow them not to be auditory. Lastly, and I promise I'll leave you alone here pretty quick, I want to restate one of the quotes that is in my initial TA guideline, and that is that remember that the purpose of teaching is not to show students how much we know, but to facilitate their ability to know. That is, we are hoping that we can help them achieve their own self-actualization through learning. And so it's very important that we are not king of the castle. Unless you know yourself to be perfect, which I've been working with TAs for a really long time now, and I've not yet met a perfect one, and I don't think I will. And so I think it's really important to remember that we make mistakes, and so acting the king of the castle, it is not an effective strategy for teaching. And most of you don't do that, but I just want to make sure that you remember that our role is not to show them what we know. It's to facilitate their learning and allowing them to know. So always err on the side of understanding. Always err on the side of assuming that there might be an exception to a rule. And those are always really good things to do. So I'm really proud of you guys, and I really wish that I had been there for the party on Saturday night. I can't tell you how it just lit up my heart when I saw the picture that you sent me, because oh my gosh, talk about good looking and a sexy mind. You guys, seriously, you rock my world.